That's a cool move.
Okay.
Cool move, but it spreads out too much at the end.
King of Pop is back for one last performance. I'm Michael Phillips of the Chicago Tribune.
And I'm A.O. Scott of the New York Times. At the time of his sudden death last June at the age of 50, Michael Jackson was preparing for a series of concerts in London. We'll never know just what those shows would have been like, but from hours and hours of videotaped rehearsal, the filmmaker Kenny Ortega has assembled a documentary called Michael Jackson's This Is It. Now, this is not an up-close and personal look at the King of Pop, who remains an elusive, nervous, Peter Pan-like figure, until he gets up on stage, when his natural charisma and his thoroughgoing professionalism take over.
Bam! Something right there. Into the nighttime, four walls won't hold me tonight. If this town is just an apple cart, let me take a bite.
The media frenzy surrounding Jackson's passing was nearly pathological, and the best thing about This Is It is that it clears away some of the hype. The Michael Jackson we see here is not a self-styled messiah or a tabloid oddity. He is, instead, what he always was underneath it all, a talented musician, a brilliant dancer, and one of the most gifted entertainers of his time. And that's reason enough to see this movie. This was a pleasant surprise.
Yeah,
I was kind of dreading it.
I say see it too, and I was pleasantly surprised because, you know, as you say, Kenny Ortega directed the film, but every lawyer from the Jackson estate is sort of in the room, you know,
very careful film.
Yes, lawyering the image, and more of the footage is from the 2-3 months before he died, when he was, you know, really in good dancing shape, and that is why this film is worth seeing, because it reminds you that he is probably the best popular dancer since the heyday of Astaire and Kelly, and you see it in rehearsal sequences, you know, nicely put together, I thought.
Yes, and even though in some of the scenes he's short of breath, he's conserving his voice, you see what a showman he was, and also what a meticulous professional. I mean, I love movies that take you backstage and kind of show you how something's being put together. I think this movie is actually much more interesting than the concert might have been. If I'd seen some of these overblown spectacles with, you know, 1,000 dancers against a green screen beating their chests in front of the Arc de Triomphe, I wouldn't have liked it, but seeing how they did it is fascinating.
Even though the film doesn't let you get too close to what's going on here, I think I would call it inadvertently revealing, especially in the way Jackson interacts with Ortega in some cases, because Jackson's really clearly directing a lot of the action, and Ortega jumps in and says, yes, I agree, Michael, we should do that.
In an exquisitely passive-aggressive way. Every time Michael Jackson is especially critical of someone, he always follows it up with, I love you. God bless you.
Yeah, right. I'm going to try that at home, I think. Actually.
Okay.
No, but the film is better than I thought it would be.
God bless you.
Thank you for that, Tony. Next movie, Napoleon Dynamite created a genre of its very own, Utah geek chic. That surprise hit led to Nacho Libre, which starred Jack Black in stretchy pants. Now, director Jared Hess and his wife, co-writer Jerusha Hess, have returned home for Gentlemen Broncos. Michael Angarano plays Benjamin, a budding science fiction writer in his teens, living in rural Utah with his mother, portrayed by Jennifer Coolidge. At a writer's camp, young Benjamin meets his literary idol, who, in this scene, explains to his students the importance of finding the right last name for your characters.
I'm assuming you love to write fantasy fiction, except the character names in your stories are suffering. Need thou not be afraid? We can add Onius, Ainus, or Anus to just about anything, and it becomes magical.
This character, Dr. Chevalier, turns out to be a plagiarizing weasel, and he's played by New Zealand's Jermaine Clement from HBO's Flight of the Conchords. By a mile, he's the funniest thing in Gentlemen Broncos, and even he can't save it. Everything that basically worked in Napoleon Dynamite, the behind-the-beat timing, the arch eccentricity, it's all misjudged here. And despite all the on-screen talent, I'm afraid you can skip it, Tony. A disappointment?
Yes, indeed, skip it. I mean, I have to say, this movie does come by its eccentricity very honestly, and I had the weird experience of kind of, you know, rooting for it in a way and admiring just the sheer craziness of what it was trying to do and hating just about every minute. I mean, and there's some really, I think, terribly misjudged kind of gross out humor here. There's a snake that has diarrhea all over a character's sweater. There's like vomiting. I mean, it's kind of unpleasant.
I was waiting for the cinema hadn't given us that yet, but we finally got it. But, and everything for me that basically works with Napoleon Dynamite, that sort of deadpan, slightly unreal sense of, all the gags being set off in italics, it just doesn't work here.
And it doesn't have any kind of emotional center. It's just about this sad little guy who writes these weird science fiction stories that are dramatized disastrously on the screen with Sam Rockwell in a bunch of bizarre wigs.
And he's a great, really clever comic actor. If he can't make these low-rent sci-fi spoofs work, then nobody can.
The thing is just a mess. Coming up next, her character will never be Mother of the Year, but Monique may just score an Oscar nomination for her role in Precious.
And later, we're naming our picks for the top 10 movies of the decade.
You don't even like me.
Have we not been in this room together for like a year, discussing your life?
Does that mean we like each other because we discuss my life?
I can't speak for you. I can only speak for me. And I do like you. I do.
Precious, based on the novel Push by Sapphire, has been snapping up prizes at festivals from Sundance to Toronto to Chicago. It opens in limited release next week. This is an early review. The movie is an unsparing look at the life of a Harlem teenager named Clarice Jones, circa 1987. She's overweight, illiterate, and pregnant for the second time by her own father. Clarice goes by her middle name, Precious, but that seems like a cruel joke. One of the people who shows some compassion is a teacher named Ms. Rain.
My favorite color is purple. I sing well, and I'm here because I love to teach.
I'm Joanne. My favorite color is fluorescent beige, and I'm here to get my GED.
Clarice, something you do well?
Nothing.
Everybody's good at something.
Another is a social worker, played by none other than Mariah Carey. Here she is with the comedian Monique, who is downright electrifying as Precious's angry, abusive mother, a monster of selfishness and disappointed love, but also desperately and painfully human.
You shut up and you let him abuse your daughter.
I did not want him to abuse my daughter. I did not want him to hurt her. I did not want him to do nothing to her. So those things that she told you I did to her, who else was going to love me?
That sense of humanity is crucial, and while the director, Lee Daniels, does not shy away from the grimmest elements of this story, his eclectic filmmaking style is almost exhilarating, finding room for fantasy, operatic melodrama, and authentic humor.
Are you a doctor?
Am I a doctor?
Yeah.
I am a nurse's aide.
Johnny.
Oh, that's funny.
That's rocker Lenny Kravitz as the nurse, but Precious really belongs to first-timer Gabourey Sidibe, who in the title role shows you not just a victim, but a smart, tough young woman taking hold of her life. And you will want to grab hold of Precious and see it as soon as you can.
I say see it too. And
nice movie.
Very good. And one of the key achievements I think Lee Daniels has pulled off here is you have Sidibe, who's a complete non-actor, very, very new to the profession, in with Mariah Carey, a pop diva, and Lenny Kravitz, and Monique, and everybody is in the same universe. And it's also the performances and the story. My God, it's pitched very high. The melodrama is almost unendurable the first 20, 25 minutes, but somehow it all kind of finds a way to bring you into the universe, and it doesn't just keep topping itself in terms of intensity. It brings you into the story.
It has a great varied tone, and part of it is this eclectic cast that comes together, and you're right, does work together really well. But you get moments of real humor and warmth and sort of offbeat observation, and then these kind of volcanic moments of emotion. And through it all, what really guides it, I think, is Sidibe's performance, which is, this is a girl who can barely express herself. Not only can she not read, she can barely speak, it seems like.
Well, I could cook, and I never really talked in class before.
But underneath it, there's a curiosity, and it's about how that curiosity brings her into contact with other people.
A quiet performance, very astute. I think it's overshadowed, for a lot of people by Monique, just because that is such an intense foreground character.
And a little controversial.
Interesting controversy, because the question is, why should a film with such a demonic African-American female character kind of, set the tone for things? But you know what? A film can't take on the world's responsibilities for the images it's portraying. This film is specific enough.
Yes, it's telling one story very, very well.
Yep, strong movie. Coming up next, we're making our lists for the top 10 movies of the decade.
And on next week's show, we'll review Jim Carrey in Disney's A Christmas Carol, plus George Clooney in The Men Who Stare at Goats.
You know how many movies came out in the last 10 years? 5,000, 6,000. Only half of those were sequels to Saw. Tony and I have been scanning that decade in search of the 10 that we count as our favorites. Last week, we started our countdown with my pick, Steven Spielberg's Minority Report, and Tony's pick, the overrated Clint Eastwood Oscar winner, $1 Million Baby. Now we move on to number 9. With my pick, I had to make sure I wasn't being sentimental about a legendary director, but Robert Altman's Gosford Park is a singular and marvelous diversion, a murder mystery with an almost cosmically impressive all-star ensemble. From behind his ever-slippery, slip-sliding camera, he cast a net over a host of Agatha Christie archetypes. Now, 2 scenes, for me, point out Gosford Park's greatness. One is an encounter between 2 veteran actresses that completely changes the emotional temperature. Comes late in the film, and it's one of the most nakedly emotional scenes in all of Altman. Here's the other scene I cherish.
I shall never be your king, nor you shall be my queen. Days may pass and years may pass.
That's Jeremy Northam as matinee idol Ivor Novello serenading his hosts, and this scene is Altman at his best, capturing human behavior and reactions, not just actors playing their parts, as if he'd just happened upon them by accident. This film, I think, is just lovely.
It's wonderful. It's a gem. It's kind of I think of it as the film that Merchant and Ivory were trying and failing to make for more than 20 years. Because when Altman steps out and does period, which is fairly rare, he does have exactly that kind of sense that you talk about of capturing human behavior as it's happening. You really feel like you're in the midst of this movie. The plot is so much less important than the atmosphere, the environment, the web of relationships.
You're used to seeing this sort of murder mystery, this Agatha Christie, Dorothy Sayers thing, filmed very kind of like head-on, foursquare, and just to see Altman kind of creating the atmosphere and like moving things the way he does. His mosaic sense is wonderful.
The plot is just completely offhand.
Yeah, right.
Good pick. My pick for the 9th best film of the past 10 years is one that I underestimated when it first came out. It's Spike Lee's 25th Hour, based on a novel by David Benioff, who wrote the screenplay. I liked the movie well enough, but I left it off my 2002 10 best list. In the years since, I've found myself coming back to it again and again. Some of this has to do with the texture of the filmmaking, the music, the imagery, Lee's almost free associative way of telling a complicated story about friendship, betrayal, and manhood. Edward Norton is excellent as Monty Brogan, a mid-level drug dealer enjoying his last day of freedom before heading to prison upstate.
Champagne for my real friends, and real pain for my sham friends.
Cheers.
Cheers. Cheers.
Philip Seymour Hoffman and Barry Pepper are also terrific as Monty's boyhood pals. But what makes this movie stand out is its evocation of New York in the months just after September 11th.
You gonna move?
What are you talking about? As much good money as I pay for this place? Hell no. Tell you what, Bin Laden could drop another one right next door. I ain't moving.
A lot of filmmakers have tried to address 9/11 in various ways, direct and indirect, but none has captured the mood of the city and the rest of the country quite as well as Spike Lee did in 25th Hour. It's one of those movies that gets better and richer every time you see it.
A good film, very well acted.
It improves over time. Really
I'm not sure. When I saw it again just the other week, I wasn't as convinced as you are that the 9/11 material, which was layered on top of a story,
was not in the original.
Not in the original, right? I'm not convinced it really completely works together, but you know, Edward Norton is an actor for me that really is one of the most valuable guys of the decade. I mean, in so many different films.
See, it's interesting. I'm not a huge Edward Norton fan. I love this performance. I think he just nails it completely.
Well, I agree with you partly. Okay, so both 25th Hour and Gosford Park are available now on DVD.
Do you think we got it wrong? Or just that Michael did? Go to atthemoviestv.com to cast your vote for the best movie of the decade. And if you click on web exclusives, we'll have an extended discussion of the career of Robert Altman.
Coming up next, we review a movie that makes The Departed look like a Boston Tea Party.
Cried to my daddy on the telephone. How long now?
Let's do some gratuitous violence.
In 1999, a movie called The Boondock Saints barely got a theatrical release, but the story of the McManus brothers, God-fearing Irish Catholics, taking out the mob all over Boston, went on to make north of $40 million on DVD. Now, a decade later, comes director Troy Duffy's sequel, Boondock Saints 2, All Saints' Day, in which the vigilantes, hiding out with their da in Ireland, return to Boston to take out Mr. Big, the mobster played by Judd Nelson, in a performance of exceptional nuance and subtlety. Not really. Anyway, so the brothers cross the Atlantic on a freighter where they meet the guy who almost saves their sequel.
What do you plan on doing when you get to U.S. soil?
We don't really have, succinct plan yet, per se.
You two leprechauns need to chill in the green room sipping on some Pellegrino and let your manager handle the details.
That's Clifton Collins Jr. with the interchangeable and barely human Sean Patrick Flannery and Norman Reedus. I sort of enjoyed the first Boondocks, but this one is half facetious and half even more facetious. It's like playing Time Crisis 3 on an Xbox during a Roman Catholic Mass. I say skip it, Tony.
That makes it sound kind of fun. I don't really see much of a distinction between the first one and the second one. In the middle, though, there's a very interesting documentary which is worth renting along with Boondock Saints 2 called Overnight, about Troy Duffy and his rise and spectacular flame-out when he was getting the first one made. Fascinating movie. This one, I will not defend it as a good movie, but I have to say I had a pretty good time at it. And it tempted me to invent a new category of vote, which would be See It Drunk. Get a big bottle of Bushmills, a six-pack of Guinness, and just, invent a drinking game. Every time someone's head gets blown off, you take a shot.
I think if you say, I would say See It Punch Drunk, because then the movie drags you down to its level and your critical faculties are shot. I didn't even enjoy this as junk. The first one I did. Well, I think Willem Dafoe's fun. This one, no go.
Our next movie is a smart little gem from Chile. It's called The Maid. Its title character, Raquel, has worked for more than 20 years for a wealthy Santiago family. The inherent tensions in this relationship start to come to the surface in Raquel's increasingly erratic behavior. One of the best things about The Maid is the way the director, Sebastian Silva, keeps the audience and the characters off balance. Sometimes this feels like a dark comedy of class struggle, at other times like a psychological thriller, heading into some seriously creepy territory. Ultimately, it's something better and richer, a deeply humane character study anchored in a subtle and powerful performance by Catalina Saavedra, who plays Raquel. She's terrific, and so is this movie.
Good film. I say see it too.
Nice little find.
And if this film, Tony, were made in America, odds are they would have taken this Maid character and either treated her as a complete psychotic who you just see steadily getting, like closer and closer to some sort of like horrible violence, or they would have, turned her into a saint and kind of somebody who would basically improve the upper middle class employer's family. And this film very smartly sidesteps all that and actually just plays it for kind of a nicely sustained tone of like, what's going on here?
Yeah, and it goes in a way that I've very rarely seen, modulates from surrealism. So sometimes you feel like you're almost in a Luis Buñuel movie where you don't know quite what's going to happen. Well, at the beginning, when she's throwing the cat in the drawer, when she's acting, because you don't know what's wrong with this woman and how these characters are meant to be portrayed. And the tone shifts in this beautiful way toward a kind of a nice, realistic domestic drama.
Right, and there is a great friendship story that comes out of this when this other maid comes to the house, and it's beautifully acted.
Yeah, it's worth checking out. Coming up next, can't decide what to see this weekend? Stay tuned for my 3 to see.
Closed captioning for At the Movies is sponsored by Hotel provided by Park Hyatt Chicago, Chicago's award-winning hotel and luxury dining experience, located in the heart of Chicago's Magnificent Mile on Water Tower Square.
My 3 to see this week, movies about people at work, trying and in some cases failing to get the job done. Number 3 is The Maid, the spiky and surprising little Chilean movie we were just talking about the frustrations of a household worker. Number 2 is The Damned United, set in England in the 1970s with Michael Sheen as a soccer coach who rises to the top, takes over a championship team, and very nearly destroys his career by turning winners into losers. And finally, it's not the greatest concert documentary ever made, but Michael Jackson's This Is It offers a fascinating backstage glimpse of the king of pop.
That's it for now. Go to atthemoviestv.com or twitter.com/atthemoviestv to give us your picks for the best movie of the decade.
We'll leave you with a recap of this week's show. Join us next week when we'll continue to count down the top 10 movies of the decade. Plus, we'll review Jim Carrey in Disney's A Christmas Carol. And until then, we'll be at the movies.
You ate yet?
Yeah, I had nuts.
Oh.
Try something new with IHOP's holiday hotcakes. Gingerbread, eggnog, or pecan pie. IHOP, come hungry, leave happy.
From Jennifer, for a limited time only, an incredible 12-piece living room for $5.99. A sofa, chair, 3 tables, 2 lamps, and more. 12 pieces, $5.99 from Jennifer.
What superfruit is taking America by storm? Sunsweet Ones.
Prunes? Wow. It's packaged by itself. That's fantastic.
This is delicious. Sunsweet Ones, the remarkable superfruit.
Need contact lenses? 1-800-CONTACTS delivers name brand contact lenses for less, right to your door. 1-800-CONTACTS. We deliver, you save.